About 14 months ago, when COVID was raging across the world and Australia was plunged into lockdowns, I found myself living in Marrickville in Sydney. I'd gone to visit my girlfriend and the borders closed and I ended up stuck there. It's a bit of an unusual place for me. It's pretty left-wing and hippy-dippy around there, lots of weird haircuts and people who, drink strange drinks and coffee and all of this kind of thing. But something I found myself doing quite frequently when I was there was driving down Victoria Road. The only remarkable things I noticed about Victoria Road were that the surface was pretty ordinary in parts and that it was a bit of a dumpy industrial strip. But little did I know that I was actually a massive racist and that I'd failed to notice the worst thing about Victoria Road, its colonialist name. Now, some Drongo councillor at the Inner West Council, you would have seen this during the week, Colin Hesse, has decided that the name Victoria Road is racist because it's named after Queen Victoria, of course, who ruled the British Empire for nearly 64 years. In this bloke's words, Queen Victoria's empire was, quote, catastrophic to Indigenous Australians, unquote, and any reference to her must be expunged. Soon, I'm sure they'll be coming for Victoria Square in Adelaide. They'll go for the Queen Victoria building in Sydney with that talking dog's got John Law's voice. And surely, next they've got to come for the whole state of Victoria. We can't have our states named after such evil figures, can we? But the real point here is that if you're an inner city Greens type like this councillor, it is much easier to talk about inconsequential things like changing road names than it is to actually do anything to support the legitimate plight of this country's Indigenous people. Change the date, change the flag, change the anthem, change the names, on and on the list goes. It might make some wealthy white dude from Marrickville feel all warm and fuzzy, but it doesn't really do anything in reality to make anyone's life physically, fundamentally better. It doesn't change the fact that Aboriginal women are 34 times more likely to be hospitalised with domestic violence-related injuries than anyone of any other ethnicity in this country. It doesn't change the fact that Aboriginal children are 6 times more likely to be physically or neglectfully abused than any other child, or that they're 4 times more likely to be sexually abused than any other child. This sort of woke nonsense divides us rather than uniting us. This is what I was talking about earlier. There are real-life issues in Aboriginal communities. Some of them are, quite seriously, matters of life or death. But as we as a country choose to ignore these issues, instead we talk about frivolous things like Victoria Road. And the most ignorant people of all seem to be those who claim to care the most about Aboriginal people. Inner city, warm, fuzzy activism is a blight that does far more damage than good. But what does that matter, as long as sensitive lefties feel better about themselves? Now, Liz, this kind of stuff, Victoria Road, for heaven's sake, I seriously believe that this sows the seeds of division and it actually puts racial politics behind in this country because it polarises people. You end up with people who think that Victoria Road is racist and you end up with most people who think that thinking Victoria racist is ridiculous. And so it moves the goalposts away from talking about legitimate racial issues in this country to absolute nonsense.
I couldn't agree more, Caleb. And what it also does is make people feel like they've made a difference. And therefore, we're not applying ourselves to some of the tragic causes that you've just named, whether it's sexual abuse of children in these Indigenous communities. We know women are so often hospitalised, the amount of alcoholism, etc. and so on. And we pat ourselves on the back because now our parliament's open with welcome to country. We pat ourselves on the back because, we sang the national anthem in the Indigenous language to begin the game. Things like this actually make absolutely no difference to anyone. And this is why people like Jacinta Price are such heroes for their people, because she's saying, look, none of this achieves anything, for heaven's sake. And she's campaigning on the real issues and keeping the main thing. Parenthetically, I have to mention, these people who campaign for this kind of thing don't know the first thing about history. It was Queen Victoria who made sure that any white man who killed an Indigenous Australian during the days of colonisation, they were hung for it. Now, it didn't always happen, obviously, but many were, and that is a historical fact, and it's thanks to Queen Victoria.
Justin, you live in Victoria. Should we change the name?
Yeah, look, it's garbage. Mate, gee, you must have stood out in Marrickville walking around like that, let me tell you. Look, it's garbage, it's rubbish. I mean, if you went to the wider Aboriginal community and they had a problem with something, I'm not talking about Victoria Street, but if they had a problem with something, then you'd listen to them, but not if somebody just pretends to be offended on somebody else's behalf. No, it's garbage. It doesn't help anybody at all.
This kind of goes to your point earlier, doesn't it, Kai? I mean, really, if we're going to talk about racial issues in this country, we've got to do better than crap like Victoria Road, don't we?
Yeah, look, I don't have anything to disagree with what any of the three of you have said so far. But what I will say is, again, something I referenced before. One of the accusations one of my more woke friends says is, oh, why do Conservatives only mention Aboriginal death, Aboriginal violence and domestic violence when things like Australia Day come up? So I would encourage Conservatives, take that argument away from them. Make sure that you do talk about Indigenous issues and their plight and what we can do to fix it outside just when these particular issues come up. So that would be my advice if we want to head off that particular narrative. And Caleb, another thing that Marrickville has, great Vietnamese food. When my wife and I go there, we give the hipster places a miss. That's where we go.
Good on you.